Hello, everyone. It is Fiona Marks here, and I'm back with my good friend Fernando. And we are exploring once again the similarities, the differences between Vedic astrology and other traditional astrologies. And I'm quite excited for today's topic. But before we dive into the topic, Fernando, I would like to invite you to say hello to everyone.
Hello, Fiona. Hello to everyone. Thank you once again for inviting me to your channel. It's a pleasure, like always.
Thank you so much, Fernando. And today I'm excited because when on your video, so for those who haven't tuned in before, Fernando made a video comparing 12 or 13 differences between what we think of as Vedic astrology and whether it's really traditional or not, and comparing it with other traditional astrologies and sometimes with Western astrology. So it was a very wide ranging video, and I have been enjoying learning more about each segment as I spend time one-on-one with Fernando. And today is no different because today we're kind of digging into, I'm going to put in the words that I understand, and then I'm going to surrender and learn in this session because from a Vedic astrology point of view, where we're coming into today's topic is that in Vedic astrology, we have the idea of dignities
Yes.
and planetary friendships and
Yes.
enmities. And they work in a kind of matrix way to work out what dignity will be there. And depending on where the planets are, we also change a little bit. But in other traditional astrologies, there are perhaps some slightly different ways of doing that. I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to learning a lot. So I'm going to now open the floor to Fernando and tell us a little bit about how dignity works in Vedic astrology and how it works out in other astrologies.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much, Fiona, once again. So let's start first with the idea of dignity and defining that word because one of the pinnacles or one of the principal points that differentiates traditional astrology from modern astrology. And when I say traditional astrology, I mean all astrology that was practiced way before the 17th, 18th century. One of the principal differences is that in traditional astrology, there are good positions and there are bad positions, right? And that's a very simplistic way to put it. But in a way, there are positions that manifest fruitful things, right? And there are positions that manifest things that are not fruitful, to put it lightly, right? Now, that is very important in traditional astrology because in traditional astrology, we know where to draw the lines. We know where things start, we know where things end, we know what things are not, right? In modern astrology, that does not exist, contrary to popular belief. In modern astrology, there's no such thing as good positions, bad positions. There's no such thing as difficult houses, that sort of thing. There's no such thing as malefic or benefic planets. Everything is relative, everything is subjective, everything is gray, right? There is no white and black. Although there are some stuff that is used in order to indicate certain difficulties, but it does not necessarily rely on dignity. It relies on other stuff, specifically retrogradation, which we already talked about in another video.
That's right.
So, so in modern astrology, there's no dignity. So, if you see Saturn in Aries, a modern astrologer or a psychologically inclined astrologer who has not had the opportunity to learn traditional astrology will say that here uh, Saturn is a teacher that will teach you certain stuff related to Aries. But he will not quote the extensive bibliography in terms of what this dignity means throughout the centuries, which, as you and I know, and others that probably are watching know, that Saturn in Aries is a profoundly debilitated planet, right? So it's not going to give fruitful things. It's going to give difficult things, harsh things, aggressive things, right? And that is going to be graduated by other factors, aspects, houses, sects, and so on and so forth. So this is very important. That's a very big difference between modern astrology and traditional astrology. Now, let's define dignity. What is dignity? Dignity, in essence, is the quality that distinguishes someone or something. It is the quality of giving respect to something, having respect for someone. It's the quality of being distinguishable from other people and other stuff, right? It gives you strength, it gives you honor. And if you do not have dignity, you lack those characteristics. And dignity, as I've said many times before in other videos and in my small classes, dignity is one of the most important techniques in astrology. And it's also one of the most simple ones. But it is intrinsic to learn in order to start doing astrology, because it's just like writing. Before you write a novel or you write poetry or you write an essay, you need to know syntax, right? You need to know orthography, you need to know calligraphy. But before that, you need to know how to spell. You need to know how, and I mean by spelling, I mean the abecedary. How do you say that? The ay Dios mío, how do you say
The
that in English?
alphabet.
The alphabet. Thank you.
Right?
The alphabet. That's a Greek term. Okay, alphabet, and we get it from the Latin abecedario, abecedary, alphabet. You need to learn the alphabet, right? So you need to know how to pronounce the words, and that is the role that dignity has in traditional astrology. It's one of the first steps that you learn. And it doesn't matter if you're a Jyotish in ancient time. It doesn't matter if you're Jyotishi or if you were a traditional Greek astrologer or a traditional Muslim astrologer. I mean, it would be unconceivable to practice astrology without knowing the basic laws of dignity. Point, right? But modern astrologers do practice like that, and they take it to such a degree that is quite how can I put it lightly and diplomatically,
Diplomatically,
to
that's
a degree that is simply illogical. For example, like this idea of predictive astrology, intuitive astrology. I'm sorry, intuitive astrology, where you just see something and you say something that pops in your mind without really relying on technique. So these topics are very important. Number one, dignity has always been used in astrology. Dignity is something that distinguishes a big thing that distinguishes traditional astrology from modern astrology. And at the same time, we've deciphered. I'm sorry, given different. We have defined the word dignity in order to understand it. Now, the thing is, we really don't know where dignity came from. We really don't know how the rules of dignity came upon. There are hypotheses. There are a lot of ideas. But what we can know is that, when astrology kind of originated, or as I say, it got together in starting from the second century BC onwards, those rules were there. So it's very probable that they came either from Chaldea, or Mesopotamia, or someplace before that. But it's something very, very, very ancient. Okay, and those dignities have remained for centuries until now. The idea, for example, that Jupiter gets exalted in Cancer, it gets debilitated in Capricorn, it has its domiciles in Sagittarius and Pisces, it has its exiles, which is a dignity that was developed later on Gemini and Virgo, and so on. And it's Peregrine in other places, which we're going to talk about later on, what Peregrine means, and so on and so forth for all the planets. Now, it's very ancient. Now, let's go to Jyotish. Jyotish is very interesting because if we follow the idea of how astrology spread throughout the world, we know, once again, that it got consolidated, horoscopic astrology, on the second century BC onwards, as the Hellenistic world conquered the ancient world, or more specifically, the Mesopotamian Empire under Alexander the Great. It got consolidated on the second century BC, and it was in the Mediterranean world where this melting pot of influences occur. Right? You have Chaldean or Mesopotamian astrology, where we get the signs, the planets, the goddess planets. We get the Egyptian astrology, where we get the houses, the decans, and we get the Hellenistic ethos of the Mediterranean. You also have other influences. You have Jewish influences. You also have later on Christian influences. You have Gnostic influences. Then you have the mixtures, right? Christianity, to a certain degree, is like a mixture of Hellenism and Judaism. The same way Hermetism is a mixture of Egyptian religion and Hellenism. And at the same time, you have other influences. For example, Persian influences, which more or less were there. You might have other influences from other people, but those are the most important ones. So it got consolidated there as the horoscopic astrology of planets, houses, aspects, uh, ascendants, and cusps. Okay, and the all the rules that entails. So eventually, that got into India. Now we don't know where or when it started, but we know that it started with Yavanayataka, which means literally the astrology of the Greeks. Now we don't know exactly when this text is from. We don't know who wrote it. We know who translated, right? We know it was Yavanesh. No, it was. Ay Dios mío! It was Sfudishvaya who translated or wrote the text from a guy named Shbudishvaya. Now, we don't know who Svudishvaya was. We know, I'm sorry, Svudishvaya was the one that wrote it, and it was the ones that wrote it down in a book, right? But it was written by Yavaneshwar. We don't know who Yavaneshwar was. Some people say he's Hermes, but we really don't know. But the idea is that the idea of horoscopic astrology in India started there, and it probably started in a moment between the 2nd century AD, 400 years after Hellenistic astrology got consolidated, right? Or the 6th century AD at the latest. That's really late. Probably way before that. Probably 5, 4, 3, 4th, 3rd, 4th, or 5th century AD, somewhere there. So it got originated there. And as you know, Jyotish is like the combination of the natal Vedic astrology, which was a purely electional astrology, closely related to rituals in the Sanatana Dharma religion. And it got mixed with the horoscopic astrology of the Greeks. And some Jyotishis don't recognize this, but the dignity rules in Jyotish are very syncretistic. Now, you have some dignity rules in Yavanayataka that you never see again. And they're really
Okay.
crazy. I forgot about them. I have them in another notebook, but they are very crazy rules of dignity that they were not used. Now, there was another guy who consolidated the rules after Yavanayataka, whose name was Satya Shankar or something like that. I forgot. Who was the guy who coined the rules of dignity in Jyotish? Now, it is my opinion that the dignity rules in Jyotish are a combination of the traditional ideas that lingered in the Vedic context of astrology previous to the Greek intervention, with a mixture of the Greek elements of dignity, right?
Okay.
Because as we're going to see, and which is the root, the reason of this video, is that the dignity rules in Jyotish are in a way, and the dignity rules in non-Vedic traditional astrology are another way. And this stems mainly from the idea that the Jyotish rules are a mixture of the subcontinent of India, right? The astrology
Yep.
of the subcontinent of India with the astrology of the Greeks. And we're going to see how things differ from rules to rules. Because in essence, in Jyotish, we have this idea of friendship and enmity. We
Yes.
do not have that in non-Vedic non-Vedic traditional astrology. Now, in
Interesting.
non-Vedic traditional astrology, we have a lot of other things that we don't have in Jyotish. However, we have things that are in both dignity schemes, and that's what we're going to talk today. So that was like a
Fascinating.
brief introduction. So let's
Yep.
go to the graphs.
All right.
So
Let's have a
let's
look.
go first to the idea of Jyotish, which is something that most viewers here will know. This is a South Indian chart with all the special dignities, right?
Okay.
That we see in Jyotish without counting the friendship and enmity relationships. Now, it's in Spanish, but I think you can understand it. Dignidades planetarias especiales en la astrología védica de la India, which means special planetary dignities in the Vedic astrology of India. Okay?
Yes.
So you know how to read a South Indian chart. We start with Aries, Taurus, and so on and so forth. And these are basically how you distinguish the special dignities without the enmity or friendship schemes. And as you know, we have mainly four categories, which are Moolatrikona, Exaltation, Debilitation, and Swakshetra. Those are the dignities that we know in Jyotish.
Okay.
Exaltation basically means like when a planet is in its vacation home, right? Debilitation is always 180 degrees away from exaltation, which would be like a planet who is homeless, to put it very simply, right? For example,
Okay.
you have the sun will
Yes.
get exalted in 10 degrees Aries and gets
Okay.
debilitated in 10 degrees Libra. Now we have another dignity, which is Swakshetra, which in Sanskrit means its own place, right?
Yeah.
So basically, this would be the equivalent of domicile, which we're going to see later on. So,
Okay.
for example, the sun has its domicile in Leo, right? But not only that, we also have another special dignity, which is unique to Vedic astrology, which is
Okay.
Moolatrikona.
Yep.
Now, Moolatrikona positions we get from uh, the friendship scheme. Okay. The Moolatrikona, I've seen that this dignity in practice is not as important, but it is very, it is, no, no, it is not very important. It is intrinsic for the friendship scheme, as we're going to see, because it is from this Moolatrikona position that we construct the friendship and enmity scheme later on, right? And the
Interesting.
Moolatrikonas are
Okay.
related to some degrees. Nobody knows why these degrees are so, but
Okay.
the idea of the Moolatrikona is that it gives the anchor in order to construct the friendship and enmity dignity that is so important in Jyotish.
All
Now,
right.
before we move on, it is very important to realize the following. In non-Vedic traditional astrology, we have exaltation, we have debilitation. So the idea is that exaltation and debilitation probably came, or I would say most probably, like I would say 99% sure, but you know, Indians are going to say it came from India and then it went to Mesopotamia and then it spread, but there's no evidence for that. The evidence is the contrary. The evidence is that it came from Greek to India, is that exaltation and debilitation exist in non-Vedic traditional astrology.
Okay.
So we can say that that is something that comes from Greece, okay, or from the Mesopotamia, from the second century AD in the Mediterranean, okay.
Okay.
Now we do have Swakshetra. Of course, it's not called Swakshetra; it's called domicile in non-Vedic astrology, which would be the domiciles, which it comes from the Tema Mundi, which would be, you know, Cancer, Moon, Leo, Sun, Virgo, Gemini, Mercury, and so on and so forth.
So
So
they're the
these,
same. The own
yes,
home is the same. Okay.
yes, ma'am, completely
All
the
right.
same. So
Okay.
these three dignities we're gonna see later on in non-Vedic Jyotish. Now, Moolatrikona, that is something that is very Indian.
Okay.
And it is Indian because through Moolatrikona, we get the construction of the friendship scheme, which is this
Oh,
one right here.
exactly.
So if you want to learn Jyotish and dignity, this is pure Jyotish. You will not see this in traditional non-Vedic astrology. You will not see it.
Okay.
This is something that is only in Jyotish, and it is only particular to Jyotish. Why? Because a lot of people do not know how to construct this scheme or why is it so, but we know how it is because it comes from the Moolatrikona positions, right? And actually, I'm gonna share something here because I did not. Let me see if I have it right here because this is really cool. This is really cool. So before we go there, let me share another one from my Instagram because we're going to see how this friendship scheme is constructed. So can you see the image, right?
Yes.
So basically, these are the Moolatrikona positions that we all know.
Okay. Yes.
Saturn is in Aquarius. We're not gonna say the degrees because I really believe the degrees of Moolatrikona are and I'm sorry to hurt people, but they're just not necessarily important. The important thing is the position. So
Okay.
Moolatrikona, Saturn, Aquarius, Jupiter, Sagittarius, Mars, Aries. Then we go the Sun, Leo. Then we go Venus, Libra. Then we go Mercury. We have it in Virgo, and then we have the Moon in Taurus. Now, why is this so? There are different opinions. Some people say that Moolatrikona comes from Mula Nakshatra, and Mula Nakshatra, as we know, is in Sagittarius. So you get Moolatrikona. So you put Jupiter there. Then you go to Trikona positions, which would be the trines of fire. Then you have Mars, and then you have the Sun. So you have those three. And then you go to the Upachayas, right? The third is Aquarius. Then you have cuatro, cinco, so the sixth, which would be Taurus. Then you have the 10th and the 11th, which would be Virgo and Libra. That is an explanation that is very popular among Jyotishis, and that's how you construct the Moolatrikona positions. But the point is that these positions will be intrinsic to construct the friendship scheme. Why? Because if we go to the solar position, right, we have to take in mind that the temporary relation is an intrinsic part of the friendship scheme, right? Remember, the friendship scheme, in order to get the dignity, is composed of the temporary and the permanent relation. And the temporary relation is that friends are going to be the second, the fourth, the fifth, the eighth, the ninth, and the 12th. And enmity is going to be the 3, the 6th, the 7th, the 10th, and the 11th. So for the sun, for example, and if you get a planet that has rulership over same signs, or two, I mean, if you have two signs that belong to the same planet and one sign is enmity and one sign is friend, then it gets canceled out and it's neutral. Like, for example, for Mercury here. So you have the 12th, the moon, he's a friend. Then the moon and the sun are going to be friends, right? Then you have the second, that is a friend, right? Mercury. But Mercury, which is Gemini over here, is an enemy because the 11 is an enemy. So it gets cancels out and it gets neutral. And this is how you construct the friendship scheme. Then you go to Venus, enemy, enemy, it's sure an enemy. Saturn, enemy, enemy, it's an enemy. Friend, 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 for Mars and Jupiter. That's how you get the friends from the sun, the enemies of the sun, and the neutrals of the sun. And then you do that for all the planets, right? Now, there are exceptions. For example, here, the third from the Moolatrikona is Cancer. It's an enemy, but it's a Swakshetra sign, so it's a friend. It does not make sense. Now, you have another example here for Mars. For example, the 11th and the 10th from Aries is Aquarius and Capricorn. They're both enemy, but since he gets exalted there, and you have a neutral here, it gets canceled, so it's a neutral relationship for Mars and Saturn. You have the same for which ones was the other one? I believe it was Mercury, and there was, I think, Venus. Venus is the other one. All right. Exaltation in Pisces, so it gets canceled, and so on and so forth. And let's go back here. You're seeing my Instagram page.
I'm just thinking we all need to follow you on Instagram just for those diagrams.
Oh, okay. Don't worry about that. Okay. So I'm going to look for another one, which was really fun. If I'm not mistaken, it should be this one, right? Is it this one? No, there was it was this one. This one. This is a good one. I've never seen Ayotishi do this chart.
Okay.
I don't wanna sound egotistical or anything, but this chart is intrinsic, and I've never seen it from another astrologer of Astrology of India.
There you go.
Basically, you
are
have
seeing it first here today.
Here you have all the possible dignities of the sun, taking into consideration all the dignities that we've discussed here.
Okay.
Friendship, enmity, which we're gonna see, it can become great enmity or great friendship or neutral. So these are all the possible dignities for the sun in all of the signs. And here we see the mixtures of these dignities that belong to non-Vedic traditional astrology and the dignities that belong to Jyotish, right? So we have the moon, we have Mars, and all that, and boom, boom, boom. We have them all there. So you can copy paste that if you want from the video. So in a way, we come back to the friendship scheme in Jyotish,
Okay.
which would be this one.
Okay.
So we know how we get the friends, we get the neutrals, we get the enemies. Now we mix the relationships. We mix the temporary relationships that we saw later on, which the temporary relationships will give you the basic relationships, right? So you mix these with the temporary transits, right? Which would be the other mixture. So, for example, if you have the sun in Cancer, then the moon is a friend, as you can see here. Amigo, friend, neutral, neutral, enemy, enemigo, enemy, right?
Yep.
So if you have the sun in Cancer, it's a
Yep.
friend. But
Yep.
you have to see the transit of the moon. If
Yes.
the moon is in conjunction with the sun in Cancer, or if it's in the 7th, in the 8th, in the 6th, in the 5th, or in the 9th, it's an enemy. So you
Okay.
got to mix enemy plus friend would be neutral. But if the moon is in the 12th, the 11th, the 10th, the 2nd, the 3rd, or the 4th, it's a friend plus. So friend plus friend equals great friendship. And that's how you construct the relationships, which once again, I'm going to move here to show you how it is seen in terms of, here we go, this one. So this is basically the combinations that you get. Oh, cancel, cancel. So these are the combinations that you get, right?
Yes.
Friend plus friend, great friend, friend plus enemy neutral, neutral plus friend friend, neutral plus enemy enemy, enemy plus friend neutral, and enemy plus enemy great enmity. Now, great enmity and enemy are really bad dignities. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, this is how you construct the friendship scheme in Jyotish. And in the end, you kind of get this chart over here, which shows you that enmity, great enmity, and debilitation are the worst.
Yes.
Neutral, you just don't get anything. Now, friendship, great friendship, Swakshetra, Moolatrikona, and exaltation are the best. So
Yes.
basically, that's how you construct dignity in Jyotish. This has been a very fast explanation, but I need to say this because, as I said at the beginning, this is a mixture of Hellenistic concepts with um, Indian concepts. Now we see the 9 dignities there. Exaltation is the best. It's like a planet being in its vacation home. Moolatrikona, it's the second one. It's like being in your apartment with everything you wish. You have food, you have your stuff, your stereo, whatever. Swakshetra would be the third. You're in your apartment, but maybe you don't have all the things you want, but you're still in your apartment, right? Great friend dignity. You're not in your apartment anymore. You're in your best friend's apartment, but it's your best friend. So okay. Then you have a friend dignity. You're no longer in your best friend apartment. You're just in a friend's apartment. So you can get along. It's okay. Now, neutral would be to be in an unknown person's apartment. You just be there. You're diplomatic. Thank you very much. Maybe you're in a hostel, in a B&B, Airbnb, or some kind of bed and breakfast, right? Then, if you're in your enemy's sign, then you are in your enemy's apartment. You're gonna have a bad time. Then, if you are in your great enemy's apartment, you are in your nemesis apartment. And finally, if you are debilitated, you are homeless. You're on the streets. You have nothing. So that's a way to see the dignities in Jyotish. Now,
That's as if the planets are hot desking. They
yes, yes,
what sort of hot desk are you going to get in
exactly.
your transit? Yes. Yeah.
Now, have that in mind because in Hellenistic astrology, almost all of these are gone except exaltation, swakshetra, and debilitation.
Yep.
Exaltation, debilitation, and swakshetra. So now we're going to see how the dignities work. And I forgot something else. These dignities in Jyotish are further evaluated through Vargas. Now,
Yes.
how you do that, that will depend on the astrologer you learn with. I would say just stick to the lesser the Vargas, the better. Stick to Navamsha, stick to the six basic ones. The lesser the better. But this will graduate even more the dignities in Jyotish. Now, that's how you do it in Jyotish,
Exactly.
and that's a very special system. Now,
It is.
as we're
And
gonna
I'll
see.
just pause here before you go forward to
Oh, sure.
say that this is essential to Vedic astrology. And it's one of the first things that the Vedic astrologer is going to look at on your
The first thing you should learn also when you're studying.
Yes, and that it's complex. It does have all of these ways of fitting together, as Fernando showed in those beautiful diagrams, but it takes a while to get your head around. And in the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program, this is the second unit. So the
Yes.
whole second semester is devoted pretty much, or the core of that second semester is working your way through these formulas and really understanding how they come about. So Fernando's walked us through those very graciously.
And that is like the spinal cord of traditional astrology, as I said. And as I said, that is very important. Very important. You should learn this.
Yep. So if you want to learn more about that, that's in the second semester of the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program. And you get the chance to really go through week by week. And then the assessment for that is a couple of essays on how to put those together and how the formulas work. So we've skimmed over that this afternoon to sort of get ourselves on the same page, because now we're going to go look at how another astrological system uses those same ideas. So let's
which
go.
is fun. Okay. So now let's see how it is done. And to a certain degree, we have here the graph that we use in non-Vedic traditional astrology. Now, this in theory is older than the Jyotish system. Now, it does not mean that everything is the same way it was centuries ago, but the ideas are more or less the same. As you know, domicile and exaltation, that is very ancient. But as we're going to see, also the decans are very ancient, but they have changed a lot throughout the centuries. The Triplicity Lords apparently are also very old. So this is probably much older than the ideas of the friendship scheme in Jyotish and the Moolatrikona, which is an intrinsic park. Remember, Moolatrikona exists in Jyotish mainly to justify the oh my God, what's his name? I forgot. Satya friendship scheme that we use today in Jyotish. Now, this is the graph that we use. This is a graph from Chris Brennan, who has a very nice podcast called the Astrology Podcast. I recommend it. And this is the chart that we use. And basically, you have 5 types of dignities here that we're going to explain little by little. You have domicile, exaltation, which we already know, right? And you also have triplicity lords, terms or bounds, and decans or phases. And as you know, well, exaltation goes hand with debilitation, and domicile goes hand by hand with exile, which we're going to talk about later on. So first of all, let's see if I get a pen here. So first of all, we have the signs here, right? Oh God, that's not what I want to do. Annotate, clear. Oh God, that's not what I want to do. No. Okay, annotate. Okay, here we go. So here we have the signs, right?
Okay.
We know them already. Let me get, can I undo? Can I get rid of that? Clear.
It's imported itself forever. It's like a portal to another dimension.
Let me just, I'm sorry, I can't do it without that. Okay, let's do it again. Oh God, what did I do? Oh God.
You opened a portal.
I open a strange rectangle.
It's a portal. It's wonderful.
Go away. Cancel. Okay, can you see the image?
Yes, but now could you maximize it again?
Yes, ma'am. Maximized.
Yes.
Okay, so here we have the signs, as you know.
Okay.
That does not change. Here we have the domicile, which would be Swakshetra, right?
Okay.
Which do not change at all.
Okay, so those are the same as Vedic
ma'am.
astrology. Okay.
Exaltation, the same. Now, there is a small variant. The small variance is that the exact degrees of exaltation for Saturn, Jupiter, and the sun change.
Okay.
They change a little bit. For example, I believe Jupiter is 5 and 15. Saturn, there's a lot of ideas like 19, 20. But the idea that the moon, Mercury, Mars, and Venus, the exaltations are exactly the same. Okay.
Okay.
And then we go to the other side here and we have the debilitations, which he calls depressions, which are exactly the same.
Okay.
So technically, everything that we've just highlighted here, we see in Jyotish. But we have all this that we do not have in Jyotish,
Okay.
which to a certain degree will play the role that the friendship scheme has and the Vargas has. Okay.
Okay.
So let's start. Uh, First of all, let's talk about exile or adversity. Now, in Spanish, we use exilio, which will translate to exile, and Italian uses it. French uses it, but for some reason, the Anglo world does not use exile. And it's a pity because exile is a perfect word to understand the state in which a planet in exile will be. What's the idea of exile? The idea of exile is that a planet 180 degrees away from its domicile will be in exile.
Okay.
And the idea is that since it is 100 degrees away from its own domicile, it will project a diameter. It will project an opposition. It will project an aspect that is hurtful to its own domicile.
Okay.
So to a degree, it won't be benefic, the dignity. So the idea of adversity or exile would be a planet that is not in his country. For example, you are in exile at Fiona.
I
So
am.
Fiona is an Australian woman in Portugal.
Yes.
And I bet, I mean, of course, you were married and you had relations there. But if you were an Australian woman who was born and raised in, I don't know, Canberra, Sydney, Perth. Perth is the city, right? The one in the west, right?
Perth, you got it.
Perth. And you grew up there 25 years, and then suddenly you are thrown into Lisbon, and you don't know Portuguese, you don't know the culture. That's the idea of a planet in exile. Now, today in the globalized world, I mean, it does not make that much of a difference. All cities are the same, and if you have money, you're gonna be okay anywhere. But in ancient times, traveling the foreign countries were not as easy as it is today. So it is a planet that is gonna be, in an alien place, and that will create not necessarily difficulties, but it's gonna create certain oddness to the planet. For example, I have 3 planets in exile.
Okay.
I'm a Puerto Rican doing Jyotish in internet. So, you kind of understand that, right? So there you go. That's exile. So there you have there you have the dignities that we would see in Jyotish except the exile. Now it's very interesting. We do not have exile in Jyotish, but all the positions of exile in Jyotish are neutral or are not as good, are not the best. And a specific case would be the idea of Mercury, right? How it gets debilitated in Pisces.
Yep.
So there you have it. Now, let's go to the Triplicity Lords. The Triplicity Lords have a lot to do with sect, which we already discussed.
Yes.
It is the idea that each sign has 3 planets alluded to it by its triplicity. Now, the idea of Triplicity Lords have changed throughout time. In the beginning, there were just 2. Then there were 3. And welcome to non-Vedic astrology. There are several lists for both the Triplicity Lords, for the terms of bounds, and there are a couple of the Decans. So here we see how in traditional non-Vedic astrology, things are not as mainly because astrologers throughout the centuries have debated.
Yeah.
Now, in the triplicity rules, we almost always use the Dorotheus list. Some people use the Ptolemy list, which are 2, and supposedly he got them from a Chaldean text, but people say Ptolemy invented them, and that they got popularized by William Lilly in England in the 17th century. Okay, so the idea here is that the Triplicity Lords will have something to say in the sign the planet is in. Now, as you can see, the fire and the air signs contain planets that belong to the day sect.
Yep.
The exception would be Mercury, which can go either or, but here, it can be a day sect also. It can be a night sect, but that's the only exception.
Okay.
And the signs that are made of earth and water belong to night sect planets. Okay?
Okay.
Very simple. So you kind of get the idea. So what's the idea here? The idea is that the Triplicity Lords will give you help. They are like your allies. They are like the wind that is blowing in order for your boat to go sailing, right? Now, the most important one is the first Triplicity Lord. And how do we get that? We get that knowing if the chart is day or night.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you have Mars in Taurus, right?
Okay.
So Mars in Taurus in a day chart, the principal Triplicity Lord will be Venus.
Okay.
Now, if it was a night chart, then the main Triplicity Lord would be the Moon.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the third Triplicity Lords, which is these right here,
Yep.
are all co-rulers. They are the third position always.
Okay.
Only the first and the second switch during the night. The third always stays the same. And as you can see, all the planets will have a role, because even though they switch, even though they're three, the important one that will give dignity is the first one, because he is the principal leader. So there's always a chance for all the planets, right? You have Saturn, you have, where is it? Oh God, Jupiter. You don't have Jupiter. Where's Jupiter? You don't have Jupiter here. But if you are in a night, you will get Jupiter, right?
Yeah.
Jupiter. Then you have Mars if you're born during the night. Then you have the Sun, right? Then you have Venus. Then you have Mercury if you're born during the day, and the Moon. So all the planets will have the opportunity to be the principal Triplicity Lord. Now, what is the important thing? The important thing is that a planet has dignity if he is the same planet that is the first Triplicity Lord. For example, if you have Venus in Cancer and you were born during the day, then you have the Triplicity Lord of Venus, and that planet has dignity within Triplicity. So even though Venus would be in Cancer, if he is born during the day, then that Venus is going to have strength because it has its allies there. Now, if it was born during the night, it won't have the dignity per se, but it kind of has a little help because Venus still belongs to the three Triplicity Lords, and the same thing with the Moon. But it's not really that big of a thing. But the important one is the first one.
Okay.
And if it has that, then that planet has dignity in Triplicity. So, for example, if you were born during the day, Sun in Aries, Venus in Taurus, Saturn in Gemini, Venus in Cancer, and so on and so forth, will have dignity there. And if you were born during the night, then Jupiter in Aries will have dignity there, blah, 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 blah. Now, there are a lot of techniques related to the Triplicity Lords in terms of timing techniques. For example, the prime luminary, for example, if you were born during the day, the principal luminary is the sun. And if you were born during the night, the principal luminary is the moon. Now, there is a technique which would be like the length of life, how life is going to be, by the three Triplicity Lords of the principal luminary. For example, were you born during the day or the night, Fiona?
I was born during the night.
And your moon is in?
My moon is in Virgo.
So Virgo. So if you were born during the night, then, oh, nice. The moon has triplicity there. Now, your life will be divided into three parts. The first third of life will be the moon, the second third will be Venus, and the third third will be Mars. And you kind of get a technique where you will see where these planets fall, right? The moon, Venus, and Mars, if they're in angular houses, dignities, and so on and so forth. And you kind of get a picture of the life of the individual in 3/3.
Okay.
And at the same time, you can do that with other things, right? The Lord of the Seventh. You look at the Triplicity Lords of the Lord of the Seventh, you kind of get the idea of, what are the probabilities of getting a good partner, right? More than timing techniques, is the idea how they are, how they are. If the three Triplicity Lords are in angular houses, it's excellent, right? If, oh my God, my laptop, I gotta put this here. Okay, there you go. There you go. If you put, for example, if you have the sixth lord, right? The Triplicity Lords, how are they? If they're strong of the six, then you're probably gonna get sick. If they're weak, and the sixth lord is in a Dushtana or a cadent house, it's really good because you're not gonna get that six because there's not a lot of strength, and so on and so forth. These techniques mainly come from Perso-Arab astrologies, and they're really cool.
Okay.
But
Fascinating.
oh yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool. But the thing is that they're different lists. Okay. So
Okay.
basically, remember the Triplicity Lords are like allies. Okay.
Okay.
And according to the Perso-Arabs, this is the third most important dignity. The
Okay.
first one would be domicile. I'm sorry. The first one would be domicile. The second one, exaltation. The third, triplicity.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Domicile gets 5 points. Exaltation gets 4 points. Even though some people change it, some people say exaltation comes first, but domicile comes first, 5. Exaltation 4. Triplicity 3. Right. Now we gotta emphasize that this techniques of points is from the Perso-Arabs, and the Hellenistics did not do that. Then the fourth one would be the bound or the terms. Okay. And let me just say that we do not have Triplicity Lords in Jyotish.
No.
We do not have that at all. Okay. Now the bounds, as you can see, you basically divide the whole sign into 5 parts, and then you divide those 5 parts on equal parts always into the 5 Tara Graha or starry planets. So the luminaries do not have bounds or terms.
Okay.
They can either call be bounds or terms. Okay. Obviously, you do not have that in Jyotish, but you have the idea of dividing the sign into Vargas, and then we're going to see that with the faces also. But the idea of the terms is the following. The idea is that even though a planet might not be in its domicile or exaltation, it can be in its own term, which will give it autonomy, right? The term or the bound lord will give autonomy, will give the terms, will give the bounds, will give the rules. It's the idea that the domicile lord is like the president, right? While the bound lord is the mayor, right? And sometimes we know that the mayor has a lot of more influence in a small town than president. For example,
Definitely.
yeah, the domicile lord is like the principal of the school, while the term lord will be the teacher. So the idea is that if you get a benefic, it's good. You get a good teacher, right? Of course, good teachers sometimes make you slack, so it's not that good. Now, if you get a difficult teacher, a malefic, he's going to be a tough teacher. Seems bad, right? But tough teachers are sometimes the best in the long run. So there you got the idea of how bad and good works, and how, even though it's absolute, it's kind of subjective in terms of the experience. Now, several things. Fiona, you've probably heard, and other people have heard, that at the end of a sign, a planet is weak, right?
Right.
We've heard that, and sometimes we get that from Baladia Bashtas, the idea that even it's going to be either a baby or an old or a dead man. But the idea comes from terms. For example, look at the terms that are always at the end of the signs. What can you see?
I'm seeing malefics, right?
Exactly. That is probably the reason why uh, this idea developed. Because at the end of the sign, the terms are bad. And remember, bad planet's bad, good planet's good. It's as simple as that. And that's where the idea comes from. And as you can see here in the second term, even though they're unequal, right? They're all benefic,
Yep.
which is really interesting. Of course, Mercury is not necessarily always benefic,
Yep.
but it's really interesting.
Yep.
And you get the same thing with the third lord, except for the Saturn there in Leo.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting. So that there's a real conversation here with Baladi of Ashtas as well. Like,
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
not a direct conversation. Like, you can't swap one for the other, but you can see that there is something very similar.
Yes.
There's the 5 divisions, and but in Baladi of Ashtas, it's equal
They're
signs.
equal.
Yeah, and they're equal, but it's also different for even
And
signs. Yeah,
it's a zigzag. It goes up and down.
it's a zigzag. That's right. Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's really nice that you see that, because that's the beauty of comparative astrology. You kind of see you're
That's
like
right.
Sherlock Holmes, like rebuilding everything.
I know, and I can feel that. Like, it's like you've got the puzzle, and now you're taking the pieces and moving them a little bit, and you're seeing it creates a different picture, but in the same way. And yes, so it's a brain strain, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, and several things. In ancient Hellenistic astrology, the term lord was very important. It was very important for certain techniques. Now, some of you might be asking where these numbers come from. Nobody knows. Just like the Moolatrikona, nobody knows. There are hypotheses. If you add on all the degrees, they sum up to the years of the planets, which are the
Oh,
amount of years
interesting.
that planets have in its maximum. But
Okay.
nobody knows why the order is such. And at the same time, there are different lists. Once again, you have the Egyptians, lords. There are others. There are the Ptolemy ones. There are a lot of these. So they're going to vary according to the author. Now, I was going to say something that I wanted to say. But for example, there can be parivartanas between term lords. For example, that Venus is in the term of Jupiter, Jupiter is the term of Venus, then there's a special relationship there. But the term lord was very important in ancient times. And as I said, the Perso-Arabs gave it 2 points, right?
Okay.
Once again, Domicile 5, Exaltation 4, Triplicity 3, and term 2.
Okay.
So basically, that's what terms are. Now, there are other techniques. For example, the term of the ascendant. With each progression, right? Remember, one progression is 1 year.
Yes, that's right. I'm remembering. Yes.
One day is 1 year. So the idea is that every time the ascendant changes and it changes term, then things change in life.
Okay.
The perspective changes.
Okay.
And there are other things you can do, but that's just like terms for dummies right there.
Good. Let's keep it at terms for dummies. That's plenty of brain drain for me. But
Okay.
can I just so one of the things that leaps out here is that it is possible that a debilitated planet could be
Good.
on a good term. Is that how you'd say it? In good terms?
Oh yeah,
How to use the word.
no. Yeah. No. Just look at Cancer.
Yeah. So let's take Cancer. Exactly.
Look at Mars.
Yep.
And this is something that a lot of astrologers discuss.
Yeah.
You were born during the night. Mars is in 5 degrees of Cancer. What do you notice?
That it's going to be the triplicity, the main or the leader triplicity.
Yes.
And it's going to be on good terms, or I don't know how to use that.
It's going to be a really strong Mars.
It'd be a strong Mars.
It's going to, you're totally right.
Yeah.
So even though it's debilitated, it's in, first of all, it's in a night sign.
Yep.
It has its sect. It has its Triplicity Lord. And it has its term lord. So sometimes don't get surprised if you see a debilitated Mars in the beginning of Cancer and that person does not show the typical characteristics. I know 2 cases, and that is such.
Yep.
But then if you have Mars at the end, and it's a night chart, a day chart,
Day
then
chart. Yeah.
which once again alludes to the idea of how planets during the night of the night sect behave better than during the day, and vice versa. And that's about. Do you have another question or?
No, I think that about bounds, I don't at the moment have another question other than what we just talked about. It adds, it begins to describe or give finer detail to the nature of that debilitation.
Oh yeah, and at the same time, the nature of the exaltation.
I was just going to say, so therefore, in reverse, you could have an exalted planet born at the wrong time of day. You know, so not getting the Triplicity Lord and not getting.
Yeah, but it's still going to be exalted.
But it's still exalted.
So that exaltation, as I understand it, there are going to be difficulties in life in that exaltation. Even though it's great, it's going to be tough. It's like that martial arts teacher that is just a master, right? But you do not know his past. His past was with very tough teachers. For example, that Jupiter in Cancer at the end, for example.
Yep.
Or at the beginning. It's going to be a tough teachers, right? But if it's it's exalted and it's benefic in all its dignities, then it's going to be a really pleasant, fun-giving, extraordinary exaltation. Okay. So we move on to the last one, which is the decans or the phases. A lot of people have heard about decans. By the way, bounds are in Brihat Jataka, believe it or not.
Okay.
They are mentioned there.
Okay.
Just like the terms are mentioned briefly in Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, but of course they change Venus for Saturn in the day and night sect, as we discussed. Okay. Now, the decans, a lot of people have heard about decans. If you do tarot, you will learn decans through the astrological correspondences that Golden Dawn gave to the cards in the beginning of the 20th century. You've heard about decans. I mean, if you do magic and all that. I mean, if Egyptian things, faces, they also are so called. There are a lot of lists of the decans. I know of 5, for example.
Okay.
There are a lot because these are really old. They probably originated in Egypt. Now, what's the use of the terms? A lot of people have different ideas, but the terms to a certain degree have a magical application more than anything else. And at the same time, they apply to medical astrology in terms of the decan of the ascendant.
Okay.
Now, there's a term about empty and full decans, alluding to the planets being there, because as we know, a lot of decans are going to be empty, some are not, and the relationship between them also have a lot to do. But the idea is that, the decan is the least important dignity.
Okay.
It only has 1 point.
Okay.
Right? But it can be a lifesaver in the end. If you don't have any dignity and you have only decan, it can be a little lifesaver. Right?
Okay.
And it's basically, you divide the sign in 3 parts, 0, 10, 10, 20, 20, 30, and then you divide it between 3 planets.
Yep.
And we have that in Jyotish.
We do.
We have that. That's the Drakana.
It's the Drakana, and it's you can use the Drakana for health as well in Vedic Astrology. So it's correct connection.
You see it's like we're Indiana Jones, and we're like, oh, how can we connect this?
I know.
Yeah, it's super cool. And you know what's funny, Fiona? Not a lot of people do this. Yeah. I mean, not a lot of people like, it's like, oh, I love eating Indian food. I love eating Indian food, and you only eat Indian food. And then you don't like try Greek food. And now you're trying Greek food and you say, wait, these people have yogurt.
Yeah.
The Indians also have yogurt. Amazing. Yeah. And the decans have that. They're mostly used in magic for talisman making and all that. But they are a lifesaver. And there's not a lot to say about them besides the idea that they have their usage. For example, the Chaldean order follows the Chaldean order, as you know. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, and so on and so forth. But the most important thing about the decans, in order to understand how old they are, is that they follow, this is how the days of the week are constructed. We have the idea of the planets alluding to days. We have the idea of the planetary hours alluding to the hours. But the decans is where we get the hours of the day and how they're constructed. And I don't know how to explain this, but it's complicated. But this is the last piece of the puzzle in order to understand how the days are constructed. Now, the question is that how do we know? For example, today is Wednesday as we're recording this,
Recording.
so
Yeah.
it's the day of Mercury. The first
Yep.
hour of the day was Mercury. But how do we know if this is if this is Wednesday? How do we know if this isn't like Sunday and we're giving it a Wednesday, right? You know, that's a debate that people have, but the idea is that we don't know when it started, the idea of timekeeping in the days and all that. So basically that's Decans. That's a lot of what I can say. Now, there's one more thing that we haven't discussed, which we discussed previously, the idea of a peregrine planet.
Oh my goodness. Okay, yes. Let's see
This
if
is very simple.
okay, let's see if we can fit one more new thing in here.
It's very simple. It's very
Okay.
simple. What happens when you don't have any dignity?
Yes.
You're a peregrine planet.
Okay.
For example, you have the sun in Cancer.
Yep.
It does not have domicile.
Nope.
It does not have exaltation.
Yep.
It does not have a triplicity lord. It
Nope.
does not have a term lord. And it does not have a face. It does not have debilitation. And it does not have depression. Now, a peregrine planet can also be debilitated or in exile.
Okay.
But now you're kind of seeing where peregrine will end up, right? Peregrine is when a planet does not have dignity. Now,
Okay.
a peregrine planet can be debilitated or it can be exiled, but it's not necessarily just a peregrine. It is a debilitated, it is a debilitated, and it is an exile planet. Now, a peregrine, what is a peregrine? It's a traveler.
Okay.
Now, picture yourself in the 14th century AD.
Yep.
And you live in your village, and there comes a crazy guy with a stick walking around just visiting the town.
Yep.
People are going to be, who's this weirdo, right?
Yep.
Who is this guy? Now, in exile, you're living in another country, right?
Yep.
In debilitation, you are just homeless. A peregrine is somebody who's just passing by, who nobody knows who this guy is.
Yeah.
So a peregrine planet will be a wild card to a certain degree, even though there are concepts that are wild planets, but that has to do with aspects, not with a dignity. So a peregrine will be a planet that, you know, is just a hippie.
Yeah.
He's just, you know, going around, you know, okay, cool. A stranger in strange lands.
Yeah.
Almost like exile, but the exile, he's permanently stuck in another place. So he has to accustom to, like, if I am a Hispanic and I go to Japan, then I have to, like, you know, got to learn the language and I got to be there because I'm going to be always there. A peregrine, no. A peregrine is just passing by.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, all my planets except one are peregrine.
Ah.
So yeah, just one. And the one that is not peregrine is in exile. So if you get a lot of planets that are in exile, peregrine, they're going to be, you know, particular people.
Yes.
And so on and so forth.
Well,
and peregrines, you know, you don't get good results, you don't get bad results. You kind of get the idea of a neutral planet in Jyotish to a certain degree.
Yep.
So that's about it, Fiona. I know this has been a long video, but it was important to do this because now people understand the differences between dignity in Jyotish and dignity in non-Vedic astrology, traditional astrology.
Exactly. We begin to no, leave up the map. I want to ask you another question about it.
Okay.
Before I press stop, because yes, we could talk about this forever and ever.
Okay, can you see it?
No, it's coming. It says that you're, here it is. Okay. So I'm noticing I think you were trying to say this to me, but you know, I'm processing things at the same time. When we look at the Decan faces and that first, second, third, now I'm seeing that if I go down the first column in this order, those are the planets in the order that I expect them to be: Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus.
I'm sorry. What do you mean again?
That
the Decans.
Yeah, the Decans. When I go down if I just read down the first column, I'm seeing the planets in the order that I see them in Vedic astrology. So for example, if we start here in Virgo.
Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I've never noticed that. Thank you.
That's what I'm here for.
That's amazing. Wow.
Whereas I didn't see patterns.
Qué loco.
Yeah.
Qué loco. I've never heard anyone say that before. Wow, Fiona.
Well, this is why we're in our
that's
fusion,
super cool.
We're in our fusion cafe now, and we've just had, Japanese and Indian, Icelandic.
Diablo, you're totally right. I'm gonna use that. Thank you.
Yeah. So we have to dig into that a little bit more.
Wow.
And
wow, you're right. And look at the second row.
I know it's the same. It's the same. Each row is the same. But that begs the question. I wonder why the first starts with Mars. Although I guess Aries, right?
It starts with exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
It starts with Mars because the first decan allows to Mars, and then the first how was it? Ay Dios mío, how was it? It's the idea that there's a reasoning for this, but I forgot. I'm sorry.
Don't worry.
But it's the idea that if you follow the decans, for example, if you follow the decans, then you will end up with Mercury somehow.
Okay.
Which would be Wednesday, and then you end up with Jupiter, which would be.
Oh yeah, I've seen that as well. The tables where you work out how each day. Yes.
Correct.
Yes, well, we can have another conversation about that some other time because I do like the
but I don't know how to do that. I got to talk to another guy in order for him to explain it to me. But yeah.
Yeah, but I do like the patterns, and I think while we still got this chart up, can I ask you? I think I've got two follow-up questions.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
This first question may not be related to this chart at all, but previously when you and I have spoken, I think you spoke to me about the joys of the planets.
Oh yeah, but you don't have that here.
Okay,
because the joys of the planet relates to the houses.
Okay, all right. So we will talk about that another time.
Oh yes.
And then what was my second follow-up question? Now I'm having the. Oh yeah, is just that reflection that as I was learning Vedic astrology, because I did not know any other astrology, so I just came to Vedic astrology with a clean slate. I
just like me, yeah.
I did find a little bit of a disconnect for me between, like, I really get friend, neutral, enemy. I get that, but a bit of a disconnect then with exaltation and debilitation. And I also get exaltation and debilitation, but I don't see a continuum where friend, great friend, enemy leads eventually to exaltation or to debilitation.
This right here.
Yeah, and I don't have a
look at this. These are the exaltations, which is what you're saying. And this is a clue in order to understand that this system is a fusion. It's a mixture. Yeah. For example, the exaltations here. Only Jupiter, Saturn, and Sun get exalted in friend signs, while the Moon, Mars, and Venus gets exalted in neutral planets.
Yeah.
That does not make sense. And Mercury in its own. Then you have the Moolatrikonas, which everything's okay except the Moon, okay? But look at the debilitations. This is crazy.
Yeah.
This is exactly what you are asking, right? The disconnect.
Yeah, exactly. That they just, I don't mind exaltation and debilitation. Have no problem with that. I don't mind the concept of friend and enemy, but it didn't seem to me like a continuum that.
Because they're two different systems. Because they got mixed together. They got like molded together.
Yeah. So today's been very interesting to.
I don't know if you've seen these. These are very popular in Latin America. Sometimes you get these bootlegged toys. I don't know if you've seen these memes where you get like a carton that says Spider-Man and then you have Batman in it. No, I don't know if you've seen these. These are very popular in like poor places in Latin America where you get these toys that are super bootleg. Like you get Ninja Turtles and you get like Superman in it.
Yeah. Okay.
That's Jyotish.
In this particular instance.
In this particular instance. That's how I see it. And And the thing is that even though it does not mesh together logically, within the ethos of Jyotish,
Yeah.
the guru culture, the parampara, the Sanatana Dharma, the Vedangas, it makes sense within that context of religiosity and tradition. But once you start seeing the roots of it, you realize the disconnect. And the disconnect is due to the idea that it's a mixture.
Yeah.
That's the only explanation. That's the only hypothesis I can think about.
Yep.
Right? Because you don't have the friendship schemes in other astrologies. You don't have the Vargas in other astrologies. You do have the Dodecatemoria, which divides the sign in 12, but that's another thing. Harmonics, that's a modern idea, but Vargas, you don't have them. You don't have Upachayas. You don't have Upachaya. You don't have Trishadayas. You don't have the yoga, the Graha, the yoga karkas. You don't have the Raya yoga construction. So these are things that stem from this system.
Yeah.
That starts here in its essence.
Yep. And I mean, just like we're talking about a fusion cafe, I mean, great things happen when you mix these things together. So, it's not a bad thing. It's just sometimes the explanations maybe just don't quite add up. And that's maybe what I've felt about dignity before. So what a fascinating conversation. We've been waiting.
Yeah, I hope everybody likes it.
Yeah. Exactly. Fernando and I have a little chat before we record. We always say, which segment are we going to talk about? And for a few weeks, we've been putting this one off.
Yeah, because this is a long one.
Conversation. Yeah. And I have to kick us out of this room because in a minute, someone else is coming in. We're going to do something else really exciting too. So.
Oh, you're late. Oh my God.
No, nearly. I'm nearly late. Plenty of time. Fernando, that was amazing. I think
I'm glad you liked it, and I hope you learn and everybody learns from it because it's very cool. And usually you don't see people discuss this, so it's cool.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's something that warrants another discussion at some point in the future, because it's like today is like opening the world and just having a look at what's there and might warrant another conversation when I understand a little bit better. So I really want to thank you for taking the time and sharing all of your insights with us about how dignity relates in other astrologies. And I look forward to talking to you again another day about some other aspects contrasting Vedic astrology with traditional astrology.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Always a pleasure. I really enjoy our chats and they're very refreshing. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. See you again soon. Okay. Bye, everyone. Stay well.